And there's intimacy on the radio, and there's naturalness on the radio that can never be replicated on TV. The marvelous resurgence of radio as a political force in this country.
News-related radio programming is evolving.
There's a huge hole in our dialogue that can be filled by the synthesis of traditional radio and the freedom that comes from a live podcast. You're about to experience Cowboy State Politics live. Here we go. Good morning, my friends, and welcome to another tremendous installment from very high above all the insipid and puerile forms of Wyoming mainstream media. This is Cowboy State Politics. I, of course, am your illustrious host, David Iverson, firmly ensconced behind the silver Cowboy State Politics microphone and broadcasting to you from the base of the Bighorns at the Cowboy State Politics Studio in Sheridan, Wyoming. Good morning, my friends, and welcome to the program. Happy Tuesday, a rainy Tuesday at that. The good Lord has been blessing us with rain the last couple of days, and if it weren't for the periodic hailstorms, I wouldn't mind it a bit. We haven't got a lot of moisture this past year and, winter, but now we're finally getting some rain, so I'm pretty happy about that. I hope your week's going great. So far at the Cowboy State Politics Studio, everything is kind of heating up. You know, over the weekend, there wasn't a lot to talk about. I mean, there were forums everywhere, and I've got actually, that's not entirely true. There was a couple of things that happened of note. There seems to be a rash of political candidates that think that they just don't have to show up for a debate or a forum, or they don't really have to talk to you at all. And certainly they can't be bothered to go to a forum or talk to a media personality that might disagree with them, or that might ask them some hard questions. And so across the state, at least in Northeast Wyoming, there have been a number of, I would say center-left candidates, redcoats, that just aren't showing up to Republican events. And think about that for a second. You are running as a Republican, that's the key phrase right there, as a Republican, in the Republican primary election, and you decide not to go to a Republican debate. And it seems now that we don't have to exchange ideas, that we just have one side that will, put out their drivel in the mail or in their, favorable news reports, favorable media outlets. They'll go on the cow pie, talk to them for a while. But when it comes to any sort of confrontation, anybody who might challenge their distinctly confined worldview, nope, not going to do that. Not going to happen. How dare you even suggest that somebody ask a question? And so there's that going on. And later on today, depends on how much time I get to do this, but I'm planning on a piece in the Open Range Record to go through all of these candidates, because this is certainly something that the mainstream media isn't covering. And why would they? Because they don't want conservatives to win. And if they publicize that, hey, here's a list of candidates that have not showed up to a Republican debate, well, it doesn't look very good for them, does it? So anyway, that's coming hopefully later today, perhaps tomorrow. On the program this morning at 9:15, we're going to be joined by the current superintendent of public instruction and also candidate for Wyoming's governor, Megan Degenfelder. And by stop. See, I don't use that nickname derisively. It's just, everybody gets a nickname on this show, almost everybody. And that one seemed to fit, Megan Degenfelder. I just kind of condensed the two. But anyway, she's going to be joining us at 9:15, and I hope to talk to her about, a lot of the things that are happening in the state. And one of the bigger ones yesterday, and it's going to go into today, is the Joint Appropriations Committee. They spent the better part of yesterday talking to Josh Durrell of the Wyoming Business Council. And I have to tell you, my friends, there is some incredible pieces of that interaction between, and I call it an interaction, but really it lasted well over 3 hours. But there are some incredible pieces of sound. Well, the video, I guess. I'm so used to being on the podcast where everything is just audio that that's why I just often just say, wow, it's a great piece of sound. Here, let me show you a video. I know, doesn't make sense. But when you've been doing this for as long as I have, you get stuck in old habits, and sometimes it's hard to get out of them. But anyway, I've got some great pieces of video that just shows you the arrogance of this guy. And, he's been on this program twice. In both cases, he said some pretty crazy stuff, and he's not backed away from it at all. And the reason why, I think, is that nobody has really held him accountable. The conservatives, or the Joint Appropriations Committee, rather, made an attempt to defund his agency during the last legislative session, and they weren't able to do that. They just now they did get him half the money, so funded it for the Wyoming Business Council for 1 year, and they did get I mean, it's not an audit, but a study of what the Wyoming Business Council has been doing. So they did get those things, and now he's in front of the Appropriations Committee. They took up this topic for the interim, and he's just being obstinate. There's only one way to put that. Agent 29 asked him, well, actually, I think it was Senator Salazar asked him his question again. Hey, what's the number? How much money do you need? And Durrell basically just said, I'm not going to give you a number. I'm going to wait until August. Now, there is a couple. Now, we'll get back to that point in just a second. But there are a couple of articles this morning. There's one in the Cowboy, and there's another one in the Turkey Vulture. But let's not forget, and I know I play these quite a bit on the program, but it's important because you have to understand who is in charge of your money. It's not his money. It's not the government's money. Often they make you'll see when we get to the piece that Durrell makes the point, well, it's federal money. Yeah, well, that's still our money. The government doesn't have its own money, Josh, and neither do you. It's all our money. Well, but actually, Josh Durrell gets a heck of a lot of our money. He gets paid $288,000 a year. $288,000 a year, or $24,000 a month. But before we get there, let me just remind you of who we're dealing with. There might be some people listening this morning that have never heard these sound bites before. Let's see here. Where should we start? You know what? I've got a montage here, and let me just play this for you. This is Josh Durrell and some of his greatest hits.
The free market as an ideal, unfortunately, it doesn't exist except at, maybe those ivory tower type institutions that we might call as in academia, and that's where it exists because it's a model. It's not about having a super small government. It's having an appropriately sized government that's important. And for the problem that we're looking to solve, we're not appropriately sized. We are indeed too small.
The free market is actually not free, but you have to remember those markets are working.
Okay,
the market is working against us, so we have to use government intervention to actually reverse that. I know all of you.
There will need to be government interventions if we wish Wyoming to compete in the U.S. economy. And that's the perspective that we have. And we do have a few of those interventions, and as palatable or as needing Benadryl as they might be to some of us, they're necessary if we want to compete with the other states.
So there's a ton of stuff in there. We have to have government in order to compete nationally. There's no way that you can compete without government. That the free market doesn't exist because it's a model. It exists in some sort of ivory tower somewhere. We don't have an appropriately sized government. In fact, government is too small. This is the guy that you're dealing with. He is a big government progressive. And if you just listen to that montage, you can pick up on a lot of the progressive themes. That it takes government in order for business to prosper. That you can't succeed without government. That there is no free market. That the free market is just a model. I mean, it goes on and on and on. But think about all of the big government, big progressive ideas that we talk about a lot on this program. That government is the answer to private business. That you cannot succeed without government. Now, that is diametrically opposed to how this country has existed for the last 250 years. It is opposed to what created the greatest wealth engine that this world has ever known. It is the complete opposite of what created the most powerful and the most charitable nation on this planet. Josh Durrell would have you believe that it takes government to solve it. And I mean, I'm telling you, my friends, you know that I mean, if you watch this program a lot, this is one of the subjects that I've been hammering on, and the reason for it is it typifies exactly where the Democrat Party and the Redcoats, which they're pretty much one and the same, are. That they don't believe that you have an equal opportunity to succeed. They don't believe that with hard work and with dedication that any person can make a good living and provide for their family, that it takes government to get in the middle and solve it. And this is what, there's a good friend of mine, B. Alfred Marshall, and he's the guy that runs Wyoming by the Numbers, which, by the way, if you haven't checked out that Facebook page, you should. He's a bit of an economist, numbers guy, and I mean, he's got all the data on the state of Wyoming. And when you take a hard look at the Department of Workforce Services, the Department of Revenue, unemployment, all of those state and federal agencies, it becomes very, very clear that government is the hindrance to private business. That it's not something that helps a business along. That it's not something that you go to when a business needs help. Rather, it becomes a hindrance because you're doing a number of things, but one of the bigger ones is that you're picking winners and losers. And what I mean by that is when government gives a loan to business A, what about business B that's in the same business that's competing with the other one? But they have an unlimited checkbook written by you. They're the ones that get state funding. And who is it that gets to decide that? Who is it that gets to make a decision on which business prospers and which one fails? Well, that's Josh Durrell and the Wyoming Business Council. And what you're going to see and hear in these sound bites is he's not going to tell the committee anything until after the election, because perhaps most of the people that are sitting on the Joint Appropriations Committee aren't going to be there after the election, and that is what he's banking on. But first, let's go to the cow pie first. In an article entitled "Wyoming Business Council Chief Spars with Committee That Tried to Kill Agency," written by the chief propagandist at the cow pie, Claire McFarland. And I quote, "The head of the Wyoming Business Council sparred Monday with the Joint Appropriations Committee, which has tried to kill it. No answer, no money," was the reply CEO Josh Durrell got when he said he won't know the Wyoming Business Council's budget ask until August. All right. No, why is August so significant? Because that's when the primary election is. Because Josh Durrell is not going to utter any numbers until after he knows what happens in the election. And I think this raises a much larger question, my friends, that even that all things are politics, and that a state agency, one of your agencies that operates on your money, that doles out your money to your competitors. You notice how the key phrase there is "your," because it's all your money. Well, the state agencies are not supposed to be political. In fact, they're supposed to be apolitical. That, hey, if whatever it is that you're doing, whether you're the Department of Family Separation or the Department of Revenue, or you're the Judicial Nominating Committee or the Game and Fish Commission or whatever, you're supposed to operate apolitically. That is, you're not beholden to the government. In fact, as far as the Wyoming Business Council goes, they're what they call a quasi-government agency, which means that they're really not beholden to the legislature. Now, of course, it's the legislature that gives them money, but the legislature can't fire Josh Durrell. They can eliminate his agency, but they can't just say, "Hey, this guy's fired." So they kind of operate independently, and now they are operating politically. That's the only reason why Josh Durrell would say, "Well, I'm not going to give you an answer on the money until August," because that's when the primary election is. Continuing with the drivel pages from the Cowboy, the Joint Appropriations Committee majority tried in January to defund the Wyoming Business Council, an agency that gives grants and loans to businesses and communities. The state Senate, which ran more fiscally moderate, okay, they were a bunch of redcoats. That word moderate doesn't mean anything. The only thing it does mean is that whomever's writing the article is talking about liberals. So get that word moderate out of your vocabulary because it doesn't mean anything. And it certainly doesn't mean what the Cowboy is trying to convince you of. The state Senate, Tara Slithers Nethercott and Dennis Beitman and Nancy Case and Ogden Driscoll, all of them are radical liberals. And they voted that way. Don't just take my word for it. Go look up their votes. You'll find out that they didn't vote conservatively at all. So that word moderate doesn't mean anything. Words mean things, my friends.
2 + 2 is 4, not 5 if you want it to be 5. And this is not to be discriminatory. This is to stand up for language. Words mean things.
So the state Senate, which ran more fiscally liberal this last year than the House, rejected the effort overwhelmingly in February. But then in March, the legislature passed a budget that funds the Wyoming Business Council's operations for 1 year instead of the traditional 2-year budget allocation. The Joint Appropriations Committee is now delving into a month-long research project into how it can trim the Business Council, tether it to legislative oversight, and refocus it onto what the supermajority Republican legislature deems the proper use of government. It's not what the Republican legislature deems as the proper role of government. There is only one proper role of government. And that's the one that follows the Constitution, that doesn't create extra constitutional agencies, that doesn't try to go around the Constitution, that doesn't try to say to, and there's several passages in the in the Wyoming Constitution. Hold on. Here we go. One of them is Article 16, Section 6. And that one says you can't give, here we go, let me read it to you. Neither the state nor the county, city, township, town, school district, or any other political subdivision shall loan or give its credit or make donations to or in aid of any individual, association, or corporation, except for necessary support for the poor. That means that the Wyoming Business Council is operating outside of the bounds of the Wyoming Constitution. There's also a passage in here that says that you can't give any taxpayer dollars, any state money, to anybody that is not under the absolute control of the state. That is a direct quote, absolute control of the state. So all of this discussion about the Wyoming Business Council and should we or shouldn't we give them your money, really all of it is moot because none of it is constitutional. If you read this document, and if you haven't, by the way, why haven't you? It won't take you that long, and it's a great document. There are so many awesome pieces in here. But the Wyoming Business Council is in no way operating constitutionally. The committee spent around 5.5 hours on that topic while meeting Monday in Lander. Its members weighed 3 proposed bills, and they also engaged in a spicy back and forth with Wyoming Business Council CEO Josh Durrell. Now, the first piece of video I'm going to play for you, Senate Vice President Tim Salazar straight up asks Josh Durrell, "What's the number? What number do you need? Now I looked for this piece of video earlier this morning while I was doing show prep, but it's buried somewhere in the archives. But back during the legislative session, Senator Salazar asked Josh Durrell, "What's the number? You know, what amount of money do you need to be successful?" And Durrell replied, $1.7 billion. $1.7 billion. Now, of course, he received a giant amount of pushback after he said that, which is one of the reasons why he refuses to tell the committee how much money he needs. So here is Senator Tim Salazar asking Josh Durrell, "Hey, what's the number? What amount of money is going to make you happy, pal? How much do you need?" Here it is.
I guess one of the questions I have, and you raised it for this committee, challenging us about would we be interested in funding additional revenue for the Business Council. I guess my question to you is, where does that additional money fit into the supplemental budget that you're going to come and ask for from this committee? And then number two, what is that amount? What is that amount? We would not clearly be doing our duty unless, we explored when you challenge this committee for additional revenue. What are you asking for? That's why I previously asked you about your supplemental budget. So I'm glad you challenged us. I guess my question to you is, give me a number. Tell me where that fits into the supplemental budget.
Mr. Durrell.
Mr. Chairman, Co-Chairman Salazar, I'm not going to give you a number. So I don't mean to be obtuse, but I want to work it through the proper channels first. But what I can tell you is that I believe that we should be working together. So if there are programs, as Representative Haraldson mentions, that would be very helpful and could be extended, I want to have that discussion to say, this is how many people it would take. This is what the budget would be for each of those people. I'd be happy to provide that and provide the discussion with this committee to do that. I don't have that number today. We are currently working through all of that. I think, as you can imagine, we're working with our team, our board, the community.
All right. We don't really need to go too much further. But Durrell tells Salazar, "I'm not going to give you a number. We're currently working through it, and I'm just not going to give it to you." Why? Because he wants to wait until after the election. That's precisely why. And on second thought, let's let him finish.
Work in with the legislature, both the Joint Minerals Committee and the Joint Appropriations Committee, to come up with, and the governor, to come up with a budget that makes sense for the supplemental budget. So I thank you for that. And you're absolutely right about the team that we have assembled at the Business Council. They're a group of people who care a lot about Wyoming. They're a group of people who punch above their weight, and they do it because they believe in their communities. And so I'll be happy to roll that out after it runs through the proper channels.
Vice Chair.
Go ahead, follow
So
up.
would it be accurate to say that you don't know how much, but you do know that you need more money?
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Co-Chairman, I don't know if that's actually accurate or not. I think the question could be, what do you want to get rid of?
Now,
That's a choice as well.
Look at his facial
You
expressions.
could make that, right? You can make that if you're budgeting.
Okay, so he's just not going to tell Salazar anything. I'm not going to give you a number. I'm not even going to tell you if you think that, if he thinks that maybe we have too much money. He's just not going to answer the question. Now, think about this. This is where we're at. So it is the Appropriations Committee that decides who gets your tax dollars and who doesn't, how that money is spent. And an unelected bureaucrat, which is what Josh Durrell is refusing to answer a question from the Senate vice president because he can just wait until after the election and then maybe things will be different. Everything has become political, my friends. And this just shows you that even the people that work for you, that are supposed to be apolitical, are operating based on politics. because it all boils down to the election. Nobody could really just do their job, the job that they were assigned. No. It all has to be politics. Now, let me show you another piece of video. Now, this one is Agent 29, I think. Let's see here. Here's the one. So this is the one that Claire McFarland was referring to in the piece. But the problem in what was reported in the Cowboy, and let me just make sure I've got this right before I play the video for you. Let's see here. Yeah, I'm not going to give you a number, blah, 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 blah. And here we go. So it says Representative Ken Pendergraft, Agent 29, says, quote, honestly, I'm not trying to be confrontational, but I'm frustrated. You were asked, what does it cost to be successful? No answer, no money. Okay, well, the problem with what Claire McFarland wrote there is she doesn't put any of it in context. She doesn't show you what the rest of what Pendergraft said was. So here's that video from Agent 29 and Josh Durrell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Durrell, I'm not trying to be confrontational, but I'm frustrated. You were asked a number of direct questions by the people that can respond to that. We talked earlier about if you go to a community, or better yet, a community comes to you and says, we need money. We want to get to your vision. What do you see? So imagine yourself talking to a community and you ask them, what does it mean? What does it cost to stay whole? And they won't give you an answer. And you were asked earlier, what would it cost you to be successful? No answer. You were asked, what is the average cost of administration for a year? No answer. You were asked, what would it cost to be successful? No answer. No answer, no money.
Mr. Durrell, do you have a response?
Okay, so before he responds, do you see the problem with what the Cowboy reported? There was a whole bunch more there that Ken said. He went through all of the things that Josh Durrell refused to answer. Now let me read you the quotation from what the Cowboy said. Let me get back there. Yeah, here we go. So this is what's in quotation marks in the Cowboy. Honestly, I'm not trying to be confrontational, but I'm frustrated. End of sentence. You were asked, what does it cost to be successful? No answer. No answer, no money. Now, the difference is Ken went through several different questions that were asked of Josh Durrell and showing that he is just being obstinate, that he refuses to answer any of those questions. And the difference is one version of it, that is the video that I just played for you, gives you an accurate representation of what Josh Durrell was doing in front of the committee. This one does not, because it just paints conservatives as though they are absolutely opposed to the Wyoming Business Council, and they're not willing to be reasonable at all. But that is what the motivation with the Cowboy is. She's not trying to give you an accurate representation of what happened. Rather, she's driving a narrative, which is what the Cowboy always does. Now, let me just finish let me play for you what Josh Durrell's response is.
Response to that?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Pendergraft, thank you. And my answer is I will work it through the proper channels with our board, with the executive branch leader, and I will bring that to you in August. Well, I may or may not bring that to you in August, but I will definitely know the answers in August.
Okay,
so stop right there. I may or may not bring it to you. I may answer the question. I may not. But regardless, I'm going to know the answers to that question. Oh, my God, my friends. I mean, this is the height of obstruction is what it is. I mean, watching him, it reminds me of a congressional hearing when, when the head of the Interior Department was in front of Harriet Hageman, and she just refuses to answer questions. Well, I'm just not going to answer that question. I'm sorry, Representative. I'm just not going to answer. You can't make me answer. This is where we're at, my friends. It is two competing visions of how this state should be run. And one of them is trying very diligently to get to an answer and make the best use of taxpayer dollars, or to determine whether or not those tax dollars should be spent in the way that they're being spent right now. The other side is stuck in the mindset of you're going to do it our way and you can't tell me what to do. And that is exactly where Josh Durrell is at. So we're going to go ahead and take a break. And when we come back, we'll continue and wrap up this deal with Josh Durrell. But first, an absolutely outrageous profit timeout. The following ad was paid for by Brent Bean for governor.
This is Brent Bean, a Republican for governor. Wyoming families know what matters: law enforcement, emergency services, and supporting strong schools, agriculture, and energy production. But state government keeps growing while priorities fight for resources. That has to change. We don't have a revenue problem. We have a spending and priority problem. Vote for me on August 18th, and I'll put Wyoming priorities first. I'll return taxes to you, the taxpayer, and make Wyoming number one. Paid for by Brent Bean for governor.
Today's program is also brought to you by Morton Buildings. If you're in the market for any type of building for your property, you need to call Marcos and Jesse at Morton Buildings. Their phone number is 307-674-2532. They're the best in metal building construction, and they've been doing it longer than anybody else around. So it doesn't matter if it's a garage or a barn or maybe something bigger, like a roping arena or maybe a giant warehouse for your business. The two guys you need to call first are Marcos and Jesse. Again, their phone number is 307-674-2532, or you can check them out on their website, mortonbuildings.com. Welcome back to the program, Cowboy State Politics Live on a Tuesday. I'm David Iverson, your illustrious host, the big voice on the right. Welcome back to the show, my friends. Before the break, we were talking about the Wyoming Business Council and how outrageously extra-constitutional it is. Now, Josh Durrell was in front of the Joint Appropriations Committee pretty much all day yesterday, and basically what you got from him is, I'm not going to talk to you because I don't have to. I'm going to wait until after the election. Even if there's direct answers that I should be giving, definitely not going to do that. Now, so the next video that I've got for you, they're talking about this thing called Blue Sky. Now, what Blue Sky is in the business world, that's your customer base. So you cannot sell your customer base. Why? Because it's not quantifiable. Sure, you can look at the books and you can say, okay, well, we made this much revenue last year. We spent this much. Here's the profit and loss. That's what the business is valued at. But you cannot sell your customer base because it's not guaranteed. So let me just play this for you. This is Agent 29 and Josh Durrell, and Ken is asking him, why should the state give or loan money when banks won't do it? So watch this.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Maybe I can help because my problem with this is ideological. Essentially, it sounds to me like, that you're not in competition with the banks, but if a business goes to a bank and the bank turns them down, presumably because of risk, why is it justifiable to take public monies and put them at a risk that private monies refuse? Why is it okay to risk public funds, which to me should be probably more cautiously invested.
Mr. Durrell?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Pendergraft, that is a challenge that the banking industry has, is that there are certain things that they can lend upon and certain things that they can't. It doesn't necessarily change the risk profile. It's just certain things that they can't put a loan on. And so I'll give you an example. The succession loan program was developed in order to keep small businesses in communities.
Okay, so hold on. Why can't a bank lend money on your customer base? Because that's what they're talking about here. Why won't a bank lend money on that? Because it's not guaranteed. You can't guarantee that the same customers are going to come to your store after it's sold and were coming to it before. Maybe you're a crappy business person. Let me give you a great local example. So in Buffalo, there was this restaurant called the Winchester Steakhouse, arguably the best steak restaurant in the northern half of Wyoming. I mean, it was absolutely incredible. People drove from miles around to go to the Winchester Steakhouse. I went there several times. I mean, it was always a treat to go there. I never had a bad meal there, always way more than I can eat. Just a fantastic restaurant. Well, the people that owned it decided it was time to get out of the business, and so they put the business up for sale. And it sold to, I think, a guy here in Sheridan. And all that guy had to do was continue running the business the exact way that it had been run before. And the previous owner said, hey, listen, we'll train you on the recipes. We'll show you how we do all this stuff. We'll even put our cook on staff, and he can work for you for a month or so. So everybody gets trained up and everything just continues on. Well, the new owner didn't want to do that. And so he got rid of all of the previous staff, and he said, I'm going to run the business this way. The business tanked for a number of reasons. One, I mean, it could have been because, and who knows, I don't know the guy that owned it, but maybe he was a crappy business person. Maybe he was terrible to customers. Maybe he was a bad boss. But for whatever reason, he decided to change the menu and change the restaurant, presumably to do it his way. It didn't take long, and that business went belly up. And then another person bought it. Now, the location is important, right? Even if you buy a business that once sold, hey, you're still in the same spot that the Winchester Steakhouse was. So perhaps you could go back to doing the same thing that they did before, and you'd probably make a tremendous amount of money. But that guy didn't do it either. And so right now, that building, where it was the best steak restaurant in northern Wyoming, and I know I'm making a pretty big claim there, because there are a couple of great restaurants in other parts of northern Wyoming, but this one, fantastic. I know people that would drive over the mountain just to go to dinner at the Winchester. But anyway, probably make a heck of a lot of money. But even so, even that it was such a great restaurant, a bank could still not loan money on the customer base, because maybe you're crappy at running the restaurant and you're going to drive all the customers away. Well, the bank has to have something that they can monetize. A bank cannot lend money on a wing and a prayer, on, I think that this business will do X, Y, and Z. I think that these customers will continue to patronize the business. Well, the bank's not going to lend money on that, because it's not a guarantee. It's not something that you can monetize. It's not something that if you go belly up, that the bank can go back and grab those customers and sell them to somebody else. That's why banks don't lend money on it. And certainly, if a private corporation, a private bank, won't give money on a business, there is absolutely no reason. And we shouldn't even be in the business of picking winners and losers anyway. But it just further underscores the point that the Wyoming Business Council is based on a flawed idea. That is, that government should be involved in business at all, at any level. Let's listen to Josh Durrell's answer.
Going when an ownership transition occurs. So imagine if you are a small business owner, we've worked really hard for a long time. You may have some employees that want to take over that business, but they're not able to get a loan for the full amount. Well, what the bank can loan on, the bank does. But we as a state have chosen to utilize the idea that we will loan on the blue sky. Those are the things that business has as an asset, but it's not a hard asset. And what that allows the the bank to do is participate and actually
Okay,
keep a customer in their town. And it also keeps that community with a business that may have to either.
So what Josh Durrell is talking about is loaning money, giving money, in some cases it's grants, on something that is absolutely, one, not quantifiable, and two, not guaranteed, and three, you're loaning money to somebody that doesn't have the capital to invest in it in any way, shape, or form. And so the reason why, and again, it just underscores the point that we shouldn't be doing this. That is not the proper role of government, that you're picking winners and losers, and it's based on a flawed financial model. If it were a good financial model, private enterprise would be doing it. But the other thing that's happening here is that we are using great sounding terms. Blue sky. It's blue sky. It's not a non-quantifiable asset. It's not pie in the sky. It's blue sky. See, we can loan money on blue sky, and maybe there's an employee that could run this business, but he just doesn't have the capital, and so the state is going to come in and give him the money to run this business. It's absolutely ridiculous, my friends. It's not the proper role of government. In no way should we be involved in this sort of corporate welfare socialism. Let's finish up with Josh Durrell.
Go away, or it perhaps could be transitioned ownership to an out-of-state entity or a private equity entity and get it out of Wyoming hands. So while I appreciate the ideological discussion and the question, what I want you to understand is that on the ground, the practicality says that we want to keep Wyoming businesses in Wyoming hands. And typically the employees are really great options for new ownership, and it just keeps those businesses going in our town. So appreciate the ideology, but however, the practicality says this is a great way to help businesses in Wyoming.
So all right, so let's rewind it and let's just listen to Ken's question from the very beginning, and then we'll talk about it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Maybe I can help, because my problem with this is ideological. Essentially, it sounds to me like, that you're not in competition with the banks, but if a business goes to a bank and the bank turns them down, presumably because of risk, why is it justifiable to take public monies and put them at a risk that private monies refuse?
So you got the point there, right? So and obviously Josh Durrell didn't give him the answer that he wanted, but so the whole point here is that we shouldn't be interfering in the free market. We shouldn't be giving money we shouldn't be giving money at all, but we certainly shouldn't be where private enterprise wouldn't. So let me give you another example from Representative Pendergraft. He's a great carpenter. In fact, he's a gifted carpenter. And what he likes to do is make cabinets. Now, he built a great cabinet business here in Buffalo, or in Sheridan. And part of the business was built on his skills, his ability to create you a kitchen that absolutely loved. And he got paid well for it. Now he's decided that he wants to get out of the cabinet business, and so he wants to sell it to somebody else. Now the question is, and when we're talking about business loans and all this stuff, just ask yourself this question: could you take whatever it is that the business council is lending money on, pick it up, and move it to a new place, and it would be entirely successful? Now, with Ken's cabinet business, it's built upon his reputation and his skills. And so if you sold it to somebody else, one, they don't have Ken's skills and they don't have his reputation. And so there's no guarantee that a bank is going to, that there's going to be any return on investment there. Plus, the guy taking it over might be a terrible business person. So the whole point here, my friends, is that we should not in any way be involved in the free market. And so, I mean, this is just entirely frustrating, because you're dealing with, the Appropriations Committee is dealing with somebody who just fundamentally doesn't believe that the free market exists. And I've played you these sound bites over and over and over, and just trying to hammer it home that this guy is, let me just give you one more here. Let's see here. Yeah, you'll love this one.
Now, mine happens to be a little longer term play than yours. However, you and I agree that it would be great if at a local level, our communities could do their own growth, that they could handle the ability to fund infrastructure and to make it so that they have streets and sidewalks and water lines. I think we both agree that that would be beautiful, and it would be awesome if the state didn't have to do that. And so
We don't
that's
have
really
to.
the problem we're solving as well, is that we have a community challenge and we have a population challenge.
Let
And we're
the free
trying to
market
work on those
handle
two
it.
things, and those are at the end of the presentation that I provided. And those are big swings. They are indeed. It's not about having a super small government. It's having an appropriately sized government that's important. And for the problem that we're looking to solve, we're not appropriately sized. We are indeed too small.
The government is too small. We need bigger government, big spending, crazy commie, corporate socialist welfare types. I mean, it goes on and on, my friends. But the whole point here now, we've moved past it being misguided rhetoric from the Wyoming Business Council. Now it is political obstructionism that Josh Durrell just isn't going to answer any questions at all whatsoever, that he's not going to participate in any sort of discussion because he's a bureaucrat and he's just going to wait until after the election. Now, I've got one more video for you, and this is Representative Haroldson, I believe, asking about this stupid Kickstart program. And what that is quite a while ago, I think it was during the legislative session, the Business Council was advertising this new great program called the Kickstart program. And they actually said the businesses were going to compete for your money and that they were going to pick the winners of the competition. I mean, they openly said that they were going to pick winners and losers. But here's Representative Haroldson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director, as we look at this, the Kickstart especially, there's a high risk. We understand that. And the question is, should taxpayers be the ones assuming that risk? I think if we look at what built America, this idea of a free market system, good ideas flew, bad ideas failed. And let's look back over history. People lost fortunes over that. And I don't want people to lose fortunes, but at the same time, there has to be an opportunity and an understanding that there isn't a bailout program for everything. And so it's a situation where what happens if we have a Kickstart that fails and they're not able to repay that, or there's a lot of different aspects to that. I think that's the biggest concern we have as we continue to look at like the Kickstart program is what does that track record look like and who should bear that risk of these Kickstart programs?
Representative Pendergraft and then Representative Sherwood.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I spent most of my life independent businessman as a cabinet maker. My understanding of both the startup and the
Here we go.
Kickstart
This
program
is
is that
what I
I
was looking
perhaps
for.
could have benefited from them when I wanted to establish my business. Later on, when I got too old and weary to continue it and I wanted to pass it on to somebody else, bank wouldn't loan money on it because there was a lot of blue sky. So in kicks the partnership challenge. But a cabinet business is not an essential public service. And so essentially to me, it comes down to the role of government. Should government be involved with the natural ebb and flow of businesses? Or should it confine itself to providing for essential public services? And I think this also goes to Senator Giroux's question. Some of these water projects, absolutely essential public services. Preservation of water, the effective use of water and the not wasting it, all of those things go together. On the other hand, a cabinet business, as much as I love it, is not an essential public service. Does that help maybe understand my position?
Wait for it.
I'm sorry, Mr. Durrell.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Pendergraft. Sure.
Okay.
Look at the look on his face.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Absolutely incredible. But you get Agent 29's point is well taken. Why should we be giving money to anybody? I mean, it just blows my mind. And when you look at the results of the Wyoming Business Council over the last 27, 30 years, however long it's been around, it's really not been a success. And there are far more failures than there are wins out of that one. There's a lot of great ones. The cosmetics company in Jackson, the berry farm in Laramie. The list goes on and on, my friends. And for Josh Durrell to claim, well, no, we're just focusing on essential businesses, and we really got to help keep these things, local. The truth is, my friends, that most of it is bullcrap. It is corporate welfare. It's not the proper role of government, and it is absolutely prohibited by the Constitution. So, there's a whole bunch of reasons for it that it's bad. Here's another one, right? And why is it? Why is this coming to the forefront? Well, because a lot of this corporate welfare, and some of it doesn't happen at the state. Some of it happens at the local level. Just about every community in this state gives your tax dollars to so-called nonprofits. But here's the problem. Just about everybody is a nonprofit now. Everybody claims that they are helping the poor. And why? Because that's the one exception in the Wyoming Constitution of where you can loan or give public money. And it says, quote, except for necessary support for the poor. So the point being is that not only are we doing it at the state level, we're also doing it at the local level. Here in Sheridan, I think we gave the city, I think they gave like $600,000. And then the county gave another $600,000 to these local nonprofits. And most of them double dip. They go to the city and ask for your money, and then they go to the county and ask for more of your money. Now, what this is causing, and this isn't constrained to Wyoming. This corporatism, this social welfare, this social engineering, corporate welfare, it's happening across the entire country. And what it's causing, and you're not going to believe this source, but it is causing a property tax revolt across the entire country. And this was reported by CNN, of all people. An article entitled, America is in the middle of the biggest property tax revolt in 50 years. And I quote, and this is from CNN, June 18th. Let's see here. In November, Florida voters will decide on a ballot amendment that would remove roughly 60% of Florida residents from the property tax rolls. Property taxes generate half of Oviedo's revenue, which is the guy that we're talking to before, funding the town, funding police and fire and parks department. If the ballot proposal passes, the city would fold the police department after savings run. And this is the lie that we get all of the time. Oh, we aren't going to have any police. We're not going to have any fire protection, not at all. The truth is, even when the ballot proposition passes this year, which it is going to pass, that's going to give everybody in the state, residential property owners, a 50% reduction in their property taxes, residential property taxes. And it sounds terrible. I mean, the alarm bells are ringing at City Hall, but at the most, that's going to equate to a 10% cut in government. And that 10% in that county is actually Sheridan County. It's the worst case scenario out of all of them. But if you add up the flower pot that they spent almost $3 million on, all the money that they give to nonprofits, and you cut out a couple of other little items, there's your 10% right there. The 10% is the waste that local governments are spending. And so one of the reasons why there's this property tax revolt going on is because we're tired of paying for somebody else's business. We're tired of giving welfare to people who, frankly, don't deserve it, and second, shouldn't have it in the first place. So even CNN is reporting that across the country, citizens are sick of it. CNN continues. Florida is at the epicenter of the largest property tax backlash in America since the 1970s. Taxes on land and buildings are the largest revenue source for most local governments, but real estate values have surged almost 27% faster than inflation since 2020, fueling homeowners' anger over higher tax bills and their properties. 34 states passed property tax reforms. Wyoming was included in those from 2020 to 2025. Ohio, Indiana, and Wyoming passed property tax cuts last year. Texas Governor Greg Abbott has proposed eliminating the school property tax for homeowners and using the state's budget surplus to backfill funding. Groups in North Dakota and Ohio have gathered signatures for state ballot amendments to abolish property taxes altogether. Quote, "We're experiencing a new property tax revolt," said Jared Wolzak, a senior fellow at the right-leaning Tax Foundation. "The populist right has led the charge," and that's the term that you always hear. It's a term of derision from the mainstream media, that it's not conservative, it's populist. It's populist, right? As if that's some sort of bad thing, listening to the citizens. Anyway, the property tax rebellion is part of a broader push on both the right and the left to give tax exemptions to seniors, workers who rely on tips, and the bottom 50% of the country to address cost of living pressures. Florida's ballot amendment would ripple through local governments. Florida has no personal income tax, so municipalities rely primarily on municipalities rely primarily on direct distribution, which is mostly sales tax. Most of your cities operate that way. Some cash-strapped jurisdictions say the measure would handcuff their ability to pay for services. It's because those services shouldn't be there in the first place. That government has grown so large that we have services for everything, most of which aren't in the Constitution, and at worst are extra-constitutional, meaning that they're prohibited by it. And a lot of these, I mentioned before that the Constitution is pretty clear. You can't give our money unless it is necessary support for the poor. Well, the way that they've tried to get around that in Sheridan is by having all of these nonprofits apply for service contracts, because if it's a service contract, then it's not a donation. The problem is these services aren't well defined at all. It's just kind of a general, well, we're the dog and cat shelter, and so we provide homes for little kitties. Give me a service contract. When there's already a dog and cat shelter that the city owns and operates. What about the local taxi service? Here in Sheridan, it's called Goose Creek Transit. In Buffalo, it's called the BATS Bus, Buffalo Area Transportation System. In Sheridan, there are two taxi services, privately run taxi services. Why do they have to compete with the government? It is absolutely wrong, my friends. It's the same problem with the Wyoming Business Council, picking winners and losers, benefiting one person over another. Giving your tax dollars to people that, frankly, they don't deserve it. And if they were better business people, they wouldn't need it. And that is the problem right there. The government is involved in private enterprise, and you cannot legislate prosperity, my friends. You cannot tax people enough to make us prosperous, and that's what it all boils down to. None of this money is anything but tax dollars. And so whether it is the city or whether it is the county or it's the Wyoming Business Council, all of it is your money. It is no different than Harry just put a comment on, let me just show you this one. This is great. The city and county and Sheridan put the NGOs under service contracts. The national NGOs, non-governmental organizations, the ones that we all complain about that were getting money through USAID, those are no different than these stupid little service contracts or the so-called nonprofits that your tax dollars are going to in the state of Wyoming. There's no difference whatsoever. So let's go ahead and take our second break. And when we come back, we'll continue with the program. 9:15. We're going to have Megan Degenfelder on the show. Can't wait to talk to her. We're going to ask her about a lot of these things. So back in a minute. I know that you think it's spring and that the weather is just going to continue to warm up and you don't have to worry about snow or ice or 30-degree temperatures anymore. In case you've forgotten, this is Wyoming, my friend, and that sort of thinking doesn't work here. 1 minute, it could be 75 and sunny, and 10 minutes later, snow. Whatever the weather, you need a pair of socks that'll keep your feet cool and dry even on the hottest of summer days. And if you happen to run into that spring snowstorm, you'll stay nice and toasty warm. Well, your feet anyway. To get you a pair, go to the website, thebuffalowoolco.com. Trust me, you won't be disappointed. These are the finest socks that I've ever put on my feet. Are you one of those people that said something like this before Trump became president?
I have a house in Spain that is going to be ready right after the election. Siberia.
Nova Scotia.
I'm definitely moving to Canada. Straight to hell. Iceland. France. Asia's pretty cool.
And has the last year and a half been more than you could bear? Well, if it has, you've come to the right place. Call my friend Rebecca Bextel at eXp Realty. She has her fingers on the pulse of the real estate market all across the state of Wyoming. Last year, she sold around $30 million worth of property. Everything from small residential properties all the way up to big giant ranches. So if you've got to get the heck out of Dodge, if you've got to be gone Johnson because you can't stand that Trump is the president, call Rebecca Bextel. Her phone number is 307-699-3519. Let me say that one more time for you in case you missed it. 307-699-3519.
I've never felt the freedom like I do. I feel stronger every day, don't you? Well, I can show you how. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. I've never felt the freedom like I do. I feel stronger every day. I'm only gonna get stronger.
Cowboy State Politics is only getting stronger. This program is expanding faster than, well, anybody else. Cowboy State Politics Podcast. Cowboy State Politics Live, the open range record. Frankly, it is a lot to keep up with. But welcome back to the show, my friends. Thank you for watching today's program. I really appreciate it. Here in about 15 minutes, we're going to be joined by Degenfelder, candidate for the Wyoming Governor's Mansion, one of the three candidates for the Wyoming Governor's Mansion. And so we're going to ask her about a lot of this stuff, Wyoming Business Council, and this. This is another great one. From the Turkey Vulture, Wyoming lawmakers mull solutions to rising healthcare costs. I have a solution. It's not the government's job. Government being involved in healthcare is what drives the price up. This is not the proper role of government at all, in any way. But it's just, I'll admit, it's the Medicare program and Medicaid program and all of, but that's not the proper role of government. It's not anywhere. It doesn't say in the Constitution that you should protect somebody's health. That's your job. That's your responsibility. And government getting involved in it, that's the number one reason why healthcare costs are absolutely through the stratosphere. But apparently, the Wyoming legislature is trying to figure out a way to lower them. From the Turkey Vulture, and I quote, Wyoming's lawmakers and healthcare leaders gathered this week for the debut of the legislature's Health Insurance Affordability Task Force, a group charged with untangling the complexities of rising medical costs and insurance premiums in a state where geographical isolation often dictates the prices of survival. Where, where, and when were we ever able to take care of ourselves without the government? Over 2 days of testimony, the task force grappled with the reality that Wyoming ranks 4th in the nation for hospital availability, but 36th for affordability, according to data presented by the co-chairman, Representative Lloyd Larson of Lander. He noted that affordability and access remain the top 1 or 2 of all conversations legislators have with their constituents. Larson discussed the economics of Wyoming, noting that while a hospital in Colorado might have 96,000 residents to support it, a Wyoming hospital averages about 18,000. In presenting this data, Larson attempted to convey that while Wyoming has succeeded in making physical buildings available to its residents, the lack of population density and accessibility in rural areas makes the statewide healthcare infrastructure exponentially more expensive to maintain than in more populated regions. as if that's a problem the government can solve. So just think about the logic in that paragraph, that what is driving healthcare costs is because we have sparsely populated communities and that there aren't enough people there to support a big giant hospital. So that is not a solution that government can solve, unless, of course, government somehow figures out how to transport a whole bunch of people into smaller communities. The truth is, people move to Wyoming for a couple of reasons, one of which is to be left alone and not live in overly populated areas like Denver or Minneapolis or Seattle or any of those other big cities. And if you're going to move here, you understand that there are some advantages to it, i.e. not a lot of people. Low crime, generally speaking, a pretty good place to live. But there are also disadvantages to it. You're not going to have a state-of-the-art hospital at your beck and call. That's one of the disadvantages because there's not enough people here to support it. You're not going to be able to go to a Major League Baseball game in the state because there's not enough people to support it. And if we had a Major League Baseball team, Colorado would want one too. But anyway, there are advantages and disadvantages to living in Wyoming, and that's one of them. But that's not a job for government to fix, nor should it ever be. And if you add more government on top of it, the only thing it can do, is increase the price of healthcare. While Larson did not cite where he got the state ranking data, because he probably made it up, an independent source, Health Policy Research Center, the KFF, and polling ranks Wyoming as having the 8th highest hospital beds per capita in 2024 and 45th in healthcare expenditures per capita in 2020, making it one of the most expensive states in the nation for healthcare. Quote, the volume of patients is insufficient in a lot of our Wyoming hospitals to keep their costs at the same level that you see in more populated areas. Okay, well, that's not a problem that government can fix, ladies and gentlemen, nor is it a problem that government should attempt to fix. And all of this boils down to something that we have seen a rise in nationally. We started out the program talking about all this corporate welfare, but nationally there is a rise in people believing that socialism is preferable to capitalism. I'm not even kidding you. CNN's statistician Harry Enton, this is the excitable guy that I show you every once in a while, but he was on CNN recently, and he broke down the stunning rise of socialism in the Democrat Party, and he's got some numbers to back it up. So here is Harry Enton explaining that actually people have in the Democrat Party anyway, have a more favorable view of socialism than they do capitalism. I mean, Ray Charles could have seen that, but here's Harry Enton.
There's the D.C. mayor. We've seen it in Pennsylvania as well. The Democratic Socialists seem to be doing considerably better than they used to be, and they have the chance to knock off, in fact, Democratic incumbents in Congress. And part of the reason for that, why we're seeing these Democratic Socialists having such good chances or outright winning nominations, is take a look here. Net favorability among Dems. Democratic Socialists of America, look at that. A plus 17-point net favorability rating among Democrats. That is actually better. That is better than how congressional Democrats are viewed by Democrats at just plus 4 points. So no wonder that Democratic Socialists have such a good chance, because simply put, they are a better brand at this point than Democrats in Congress.
Among Democrats, it's interesting to see who they like more. All right, and you've used this number before. I always find this fascinating. When you compare socialism to capitalism, how are they doing right now?
Yeah, how are they doing right now among Democrats? You see this Democratic Socialists of America more positive than congressional Democrats. And I'll tell you, take a look at the trend line, the favorable rating among Democrats on socialism and look at this. In 2010, they were about equal. 50% had a favorable view of socialism. 51% said the same about capitalism. But capitalism has absolutely fallen through the floor. Look at this. It's now just 42% of Democrats who have a favorable view of capitalism. Socialism, on the other hand, up like a rocket. Look at this. 2 in 3 Democrats have a favorable view of socialism. So socialism is on the rise among Democrats. Capitalism is on the decline among Democrats. And again, this is part of the longer-term current trend in which we are seeing Democratic socialists doing considerably better among Democrats, electing a mayor right here in New York City, for example.
And as we said, there are primaries next week with Democratic socialists.
Okay, all right. So those are the favorability numbers among Democrats. Now, I doubt very seriously that you're going to see those sort of numbers about Republicans, but it does show you why there is an increase in the number of openly socialist candidates. Now, I mean, a lot of the Democrats are socialists. They just won't admit it. It's like in Wyoming, a lot of the people in the legislature are really Democrats. They just won't admit it. But this also tells you another thing, that with the Wyoming Business Council, this task force on affordability, one of the reasons why you're seeing redcoats in the state, and Lloyd Larson, Slithers Nethercott, who was on that panel, Josh Durrell, why they feel so confident in pushing the narrative that the government has to be injected in all of these different sectors of our society, is because they see the net favorability rating among their people of socialism. And it's not hard to see. I mean, Mamdani in New York, and there's a congresswoman or a woman running for Congress that is an avowed socialist. There's the mayor in Seattle. She's not doing so great. But redcoats in this state, and again, they're really Democrats. And so they see the net favorability ratings and, a lot of the surge of the Socialist Party. And so they deduce that maybe people are more amenable to these types of government-centered approaches. And so, I mean, it makes sense. I mean, Wyoming, I tell you all the time that Wyoming is not immune from all of these, national trends. No matter how much the governor and the redcoats try to tell you that it is, national trends do affect and are in Wyoming. And so to deny it, it's just to deny reality. And so, with any of these things, whether it's healthcare or the Wyoming Business Council or whatever government service that, you want to talk about, one of the reasons is that the Democrats that are hiding in the Republican Party, they see this and they say, well, it's on the rise. Let's go ahead and push it. Now, of course, the redcoats are not in power right now, and so they can't really do too much, except, of course, start all their little task forces and interim studies and everything. And, the interim study on the Wyoming Business Council, I'm not opposed to it because, in theory, it should expose all of the failures of the Wyoming Business Council. And what they'll find, if it's at all honest, they'll find that it is not and has not been a success. Now, sure, it might help, if you give a pile of money to business A and they're, at least a halfway decent business person, you would think that they would do all right. But all of this stuff, it is just a reflection of what's happening nationally. And, this election is going to determine a lot. And if you want to see the, Wyoming move more towards the American left, well, then vote for the redcoats. There's a whole bunch of them running this time around. But if you think that we maybe need to make a U-turn and not do any of that stuff and get government out of your life and stop spending all of your money and stop taxing the bejesus out of you, well, then there's another group to vote for, and it's the conservatives. Remember, if you have a conservative in office and doing a halfway decent job, another conservative is not going to run against them. Why would they? They can go fishing or hunting and not waste their time down in Cheyenne because you've already got a solid conservative there. And so if there is a challenger, there's two narratives going on. One, they're a Freedom Caucus, and so you have to vote against them, which is a specious argument anyway. There's nothing backing it up. And if anybody ever makes that argument to them, this is the response you should use. Give me one example of one thing that the Freedom Caucus has done that is outside the bounds of the Constitution. Name me one thing that the Freedom Caucus has actually done that you disagree with. And don't tell me it's their attitude. Don't tell me they're a bunch of meanies. Don't tell me that you don't like the things that they put in your mailbox. It's none of that stuff. All of that is rhetoric. Force the person that is making that argument to say, okay, this is what they've done that I disagree with. And it's going to be very, very difficult for that person to make any sort of, cogent argument. They're just not going to be able to. So in a few minutes here, we should have the superintendent of public instruction, candidate for Wyoming governor, Megan Degenfelder, joining us on the show. A couple of things about the governor's race. I haven't seen any, actual polling on paper, but I think that all three of them are campaigning pretty hard. Now, it's hard to say how the race is shaping up at this point. But I'll give you my take on it. The folks that are going to vote for Eric Barlow, unless he's absolutely bamboozled you, they're not going to be the folks that vote for the conservative in the race, Brent Behan. But just not going to happen because Barlow is most definitely on the left. Similarly, the folks that are diehard Brent Behan supporters, you're never going to convince them to vote for Eric Barlow. And then you add Megan Degenfelder in the mix. And, it could very well be a third, and a third. I happen to think that, maybe the contest is shaping up to be more a battle of conservatism versus the Wyoming left. But we're going to ask Megan Degenfelder about that. And we're going to give her a little bit of leeway because she was at a forum before coming on before the 9:15 hour. So we'll just keep our eyes peeled. And when she pops into the room, we'll go ahead and talk to her. Let's see here. What can we... Oh, here's a funny story. So there was a... where is it? Let's see here. No. Here we go. Yeah. This is what I was looking for. So in Florida, I was saving this for later on in the program, but I think this is wonderfully funny. 85-year-old arrested for street racing in a sports car while smoking a cigarillo, according to police. An 85-year-old man was arrested after allegedly street racing in a sports car while smoking a cigarillo. The 85-year-old man was arrested after allegedly racing at 100 miles an hour in his sports car. When confronted, he reportedly told the police that, quote, "I was just having a little ride in my favorite car." And what are you going to do? Are you going to throw an 85-year-old man in the slammer? Well, they did. And according to the body cam video, an arrest affidavit obtained by the local outlet, a deputy found two cars that appeared to be street racing at about 11:40 p.m. on June the 12th. One was a red Corvette traveling at around 125 miles an hour, and the other was a gray Nissan sports car traveling at 110 miles an hour. The officer turned on his lights and pulled over the gray sports car, which was driven by 85-year-old William Bosworth, as in Brian Bosworth. But, okay, yes, I can show you. Hold on just a second. I'll show you what this guy looks like. Wonderful, wonderful. And you can imagine that this guy, he's like, I'm 85 years old. I'm really not really worried about getting arrested, but here he is. Look at him. He's got a smile on his face. It's probably the highlight of his day, getting popped for doing 100 miles an hour in his sports car. Absolutely tremendous, my friends. I hope when we're all 85 that we just throw caution to the wind and say, let's go race the sports car. Now, I'm not in favor of endangering the public or anything like that. I don't think that's right. But if you got a long straightaway and you've got a hot car, there's this guy in Buffalo that has a blue Corvette. You just look at it and you say, that is a very, very fast car. And you talk to it, and it's this little old man. And I remember we were at lunch in downtown Buffalo, and the person I was with, I can't remember who it was, but asked him, "So why'd you buy this car?" And he said, "I had to wait this long till I could afford it." But he also said that things get a little spooky at 140. But anyway, so yeah, I hope when we're all 85 years old, that we can go buy a hot sports car and drive at about 90 miles an hour, 100 miles an hour, whatever. So I haven't spoken a lot about this at all, really. And it's that Tucker Carlson. Now, I used to watch Tucker Carlson all the time. I would DVR his stuff and make sure that I didn't miss an episode. I really liked his, his ability to, talk to people and ask the hard questions. That's what I try to do on Cowboy state politics, but the guy's really changed. Now, there's a report from Breitbart, and the title of the piece is Tucker Carlson Breaks from GOP. No chance I would support the Republican Party. While speaking on an episode of the podcast Can't Be Censored, Carlson criticized the Trump administration for not being serious when it comes to strengthening the U.S. relationship with Canada and for being completely focused on the Middle East. Carlson also stated that the United States has gone to war with Iran because, quote, because of pressure from the Prime Minister of Israel. Carlson also pointed out that Canada is the United States' closest ally in the world. That's not even remotely true, by the way. Our closest ally is probably a race between Israel and Great Britain. But anyway, let's see here. And added that what happens in Canada matters a lot more than what happens in Israel or Lebanon or Iraq or Iran. I don't know if I can agree with that one either. Because we live in an increasingly interconnected world. And what does happen on the other side of the planet affects us to a great degree. And if you have the chief sponsor of terror in the world, and they are publicly saying we have enough uranium for about 11 nuclear weapons, and they've increased their enriched uranium stockpile by over 80%, that's a problem. Iran having a nuclear weapon is a problem. Now, I'm not a fan of how things have ended up. I thought we should have, absolutely worked on regime change there. I see no reason why we shouldn't have. In fact, I think that it's, I think I kind of disagree with it. But here's another reason why I really have a problem with a lot of what Carlson is saying. So listen to this, and then we'll talk about this on the other side. This one, man, it really kind of bums me out because I used to enjoy watching Tucker, but check this out.
That's a great question. So I want to say when I dislike the Republican Party, I love average Republican voters. I've been one my whole life. They're my neighbors and friends and relatives, but the Republican Party in Washington is just completely out of control. I don't share their values on any level. Their personal values, the way they live, greedy, bizarro sex lives, loyal to a foreign country above the United States. It's like everything I dislike. And so I just really find, beginning with the Speaker of the House, Speaker Mike Johnson, and extending to the president and the leaders in the Senate. I have nothing in common with these people at all. I do not share their values. I find their priorities appalling. And so I'm just not going to participate in that party at this point.
What's your take on J.D. Vance? Do you think he is still America first? Because I know you were friends.
I love J.D. Vance.
You do.
I know. I know J.D. so well, and Vice President Vance, and I've known him since long before he got into politics, and I know his family well, and my wife knows. I think of him as a friend. I will always think of him as a friend. And I was an ardent advocate for him being vice president, for him getting elected to the Senate. I've always been a big J.D. Vance fan because.
Okay, all right. Well, whatever. So he's kind of dancing around it, but what he said was if you listen carefully, you could hear the long list of his grievances against the Republican Party, that he can't support them at all. Now, here's the truth. There are people in the Republican Party that do not support your values. They're redcoats, okay? There are a lot of people in the Republican Party that would not vote to protect little children, that would vote against your gun rights, that would vote to increase your taxes, that are essentially Democrats in Republican clothes. That's why I call them redcoats. However, to say that I just can't support the Republican Party at all. Who are you going to support? The Democrat? You're going to support the socialist wing of the party? Because here's my opinion on this whole thing, my friends, that, and we see this all the time in Wyoming elections. You have 2 or 3 or 4 candidates. The vote gets split. And who ends up winning? The liberal. Mark Gordon, 33%. Matt Mead, 27%. The election to Congress the winner is probably going to have, I don't know, somewhere around 20, 25% of the vote. Not going to say, and that one's different because there's so many candidates that I do think that it's anybody's game. There are a couple people at the top. I could tell you what our poll is saying, or at least our congressional debate poll. I don't know that it's all that scientific, but the point is, my friends, that if you don't support the Republican Party, you are, by definition, helping the left. If what you are doing helps the left in any way, that means, by definition, you're part of it. That if you're actively making a choice to vote against conservatism, understanding, of course, that there are people in the Republican Party that aren't Republicans. I'll give you there's a long list of them. Nancy Case, Slithers Nethercott, Ogden Driscoll. None of those people are conservatives. They claim to be, but they're. All you have to do, my friends, is look at their voting record, and you can find out, who these people are. But to just say, well, I'm not going to support the Republican Party, that is absolutely a load of bullcrap, because what's going to happen is you are going to help the left. And if whatever it is that you're doing in the end helps the left in this country, then you, my friend, are a leftist. All right, so Megan finally joined the program. And so let's go ahead and get her on here. Let's see here. What's going on here? Maybe we can get it a little bit bigger. Maybe not. I have no idea what's going on here. Megan, welcome to the program. Well, I figured this out.
Hey, David. Thanks for having me. Sorry I'm late. We had a governor's forum with the agriculture community.
How'd that go?
It was good. Yeah, wonderful.
Okay, great. Well, welcome to the program. There we go. Well, something's going on weird here. I'm messing with the view on the program. I have no idea. So, I guess first question for you: how do you see your race shaping up right now? Where are you at? Give us the details on it.
Yeah, things are going well. We're really seeing strong momentum in the race. When I talk to the people in Wyoming, it is so clear that they do not want status quo. They want strong leaders that are going to lead the state into the future. They're tired of feeling like they can hardly afford to stay in their house, that they're struggling with jobs, that their kids are leaving. They have to get on an airplane just to go see their grandchildren. And so people are frustrated and they want bold leadership. They don't just want the status quo.
Okay, great. Well, I guess the next question. I spent a number of, and let's see here. I'm still struggling with getting this whole screen figured out, but you can hear me. So I spent a lot of the program talking about the Wyoming Business Council. And if you're elected governor, would you be in favor of eliminating the Wyoming Business Council? Would you reduce it? Would you rein it in? I guess first two questions. One, what are your thoughts on it? And two, if you were elected governor, what would you do with it?
Well, first off, government doesn't create jobs. The private sector does. Now, when we talk about economic development, so then what does that mean, right? And I think we've gotten away from the fundamental purpose of economic development. And so I think we need some major reform there. And I've talked about that for a very long time. I have brought my critiques of the Business Council for many, many years before I got into elected office. And so I think our focus should be really simple. Number one is around baseline infrastructure. It's fun for a politician to have a big ribbon cutting and be involved in this new fancy business that comes to town. But you often have a community that their failing water infrastructure can't even support these new companies that were coming in for the fancy ribbon cutting. And so we need to get back to that purpose, which is fundamental of government, is to provide that infrastructure. And then I think our focus, we spent so many years, decades, working on diversification, right? Let's diversify our economy. Well, all that does is it pulls on the industries that support our state because of the nature of our tax structure and the fact that our mineral industry is the industry that supports Wyoming. And so you try to move away. For too long, we were moving away from what we're good at. And I'm an economist. And so you focus on your strengths, you specialize, and we look at the value add within those industries. And so I'd really like us to focus on our legacy industries and then be able to develop within the value chain of processing, of manufacturing, of those type of things. And don't keep down this road of trying to be something that we're not as Wyoming. It's not going to work for our tax revenue. It's just not going to work for who we are as Wyoming.
Okay, fair enough. Oh, and by the way, I wanted to commend you for your answer during the Family Alliance Forum when you were asked about abortion. I really appreciated you not pulling any punches, and so thank you for that. But I do have a question surrounding that. Do you think that a constitutional amendment is a wise idea? Do you think that is the solution to protecting the life of the unborn, or would you say that somehow working on our judiciary is the solution? How would you fix that?
Well, look, I mean, I would obviously support having this memorialized in our Constitution, that abortion is in fact not healthcare. What a crazy idea, right? That killing a baby is not considered healthcare. But, I think what we need to decide is Wyoming willing to come together? Conservatives come together to get this done, because we've seen in other states where this effort has backfired. Kansas, for example, and these pro-choice folks, they are. I mean, this is spiritual warfare. I mean, we're competing with the devil here. This is tough, and we got to dig in. And so we have to come together. We have to win hearts and minds. We have to get it over the finish line, because we know these pro-choice groups. They come in, they spend millions of dollars, and they try to influence these type of constitutional amendments. And so that's first and foremost. We have to come together to be able to get that done. I think looking at judiciary is something we should always do. I think we should remember there's no perfect system. Sometimes folks say, oh, now let's jump to electing judges. Well, look at states that have had repercussions there, right? And so
Wisconsin.
Yep, exactly. So I think looking at, potential reform, should we mirror the federal process of appointing at large and then confirmation by the Senate? I'm not opposed to that discussion at all. But I think we're going to have to, hit this from all sides and identify how we actually get this done, because, meanwhile, the courts have decided that we're now the most open, or one of the most open states for abortion in the country. And so
we are.
This is what we're up against.
Okay. So one more question on that, kind of related to it, I guess. So one, in Wyoming, we are one of the few states that have an appointed attorney general. And we've watched, so a good example, last election cycle, there were 16 election complaints, some of which were kind of borderline questionable. I mean, I broke a story on all of the election complaints sitting on the attorney general's desk, and nothing happened. One of which was absolutely investigated by a sheriff's department. By the way, I should send you the sheriff's report. It's wonderful reading. But our attorney general didn't do anything with it and just left it on her desk and just let them all go. So if you're the governor, would you be in favor of an elected attorney general, or do you like the current setup that we have?
I think this is another one of be careful what you wish for, because we've seen in other states where this becomes politicized and it actually hurts our cause. And so it's not always, the grass is always greener. And so what you do need is a strong governor that's going to put a bulldog in that position, that knows the governor's values and priorities so well that there's an amicus brief on the governor's desk the next morning after we have an event that occurs. And that's the kind of leadership that we need. I mean, too often, we're waiting a long time on intervening in the ban of boys and girls sports or that litigation. And so I think having a strong attorney general, but that starts with having a strong governor. And these elections have consequences. Who you put into the governor's office has consequences here. And we need an attorney general that's really going to be a bulldog and going to fight for Wyoming. And we don't wait to become the 5th state, the 10th state to jump onto a lawsuit. We're the first one. We're leading that thing. That's really what we need out of the governor's office and the AG.
Okay, now I might make an argument that that's exactly what the governor has had for quite a while with our current attorney general. But let me go back to kind of the Wyoming Business Council adjacent area for just a little bit. In Wyoming, the governor has a tremendous amount of power. There are a zillion different agencies that you get to appoint. I mean, there's the Judicial Nominating Committee, there's the Board of Trustees, there's a whole bunch of them. But one of the things that I covered on this morning's program is that agency heads, namely the Wyoming Business Council, have decided that they're going to act as an entirely political body. And let me give you for instance in that. Yesterday in the Joint Appropriations Committee, Durrell was asked point blank, how much money do you need? And he flat said, I'm not going to give you an answer until August. Well, we all know what happens in August. That's the election. So as governor, what would you do to rein in some of these agencies? The Department of Revenue is another one that just kind of makes its own rules. But as governor, what would you do to get a handle on a lot of these agencies, or would you do anything at all? Do you even think that they're a problem? Talk to me about it.
Yeah, so great question. And I would also note that with the Business Council, the governor is the co-chair of the business council. The governor has a seat at the table and should be involved in these conversations, not just saying, here, I've appointed my board and I step away. They should be involved in those conversations. And then as it relates to all of state government, that is a chief role of the governor is to, as you say, appoint these state agency heads and to make sure not only that, but again, it's not just I appoint someone and I let them run. It is how do I ensure that my priorities are being, delivered from that state agency. And so that's what I've done at the Department of Education is really create a culture and then where our mission and our core values are. Because the folks, they're desperate for leadership. They want someone who is going to lead them. But you have to show them where we're headed. They should know. And I've always said, people might disagree with where I'm going, but they're going to know exactly where I'm going. And then that's the first battle. And so in the Department of Education, we said, okay, we've got 3 core values. It's innovation, it's customer service, it's transparency. And if every employee isn't doing one of those 3 things every day, then they're not on board with the mission. And we've actually started having awards for our core value heroes that are doing those things, awards for reducing bureaucracy for the people that we serve. So number 1 is getting strong bulldogs that are going to be in those positions and they are aligned to the mission and vision of the governor. Then it's giving them a direction of where we're heading, setting the strategy for that agency. And then this culture of how do we get to yes. A lot of times state government, it's just, okay, here's the rule, here's the reg, we're going to be bureaucratic about this. And I don't think there's ill intent in a lot of cases, but it's just the nature of the beast. And so you have to shift that mindset within state government of how do we get to yes, how do we actually reduce our workload, and then how do you reward them, how do you incentivize state employees to do that? And I'm the candidate in this race that has the experience to do that, has proven that. I was one of only 2 state agencies that brought a reduced budget to the legislature. It's hard work. You got to roll up your sleeves and find efficiencies. And so that's really important. And that's a role of the governor statewide.
Okay, so just to be clear, your answer is just change the culture, don't change how agencies operate. Did I get that?
Oh, no, I think you change. I think you go through every single agency and we look for efficiencies and how we rethink operational wise, how we move forward. There's, I think, 140 boards and commissions. Do we need all of these boards and commissions? I mean, do we need, it's extra layers of government, right? And so how do you look at that? The governor's cabinet, I think, is 40 people, David. Whoa. You go around, you have a session for an hour, everyone gives a 1-minute update. What have we done to move the state forward and actually strategize?
Nothing.
Yeah. And so so yes, absolutely. It's both of those things, setting the culture, having the vision and strategy, but then it's rethinking how we, initiate state government. Another thing that I've done with my team, because I recognized early on, this is what happens. So if someone retires or leaves their role, automatically their supervisor, like the next day, has posted the position. And there's no thought of how do we need this position? Could we combine other roles within it? And so with my leadership team, I said, time out. When anyone leaves a position, we are going to come together as leadership and we're going to talk through, does this position make sense? Do we need to rethink their job duties? Are they in the right team? And that's what we started to do. But again, that takes work because you're changing the way that government operates.
Well, and I think one of the problems in Wyoming is we have a lot of agencies that are just absolutely duplicative. We were speaking about the Wyoming Business Council. There's 2 other Wyoming agencies that pretty much do the exact same thing. It's just that we give more money to Josh Durrell to pass around than others. Let's talk about one of those agencies. I guess we could call it an agency, the University of Wyoming. Should the Board of Trustees be elected? Why or why not?
So, and actually, I'm going to go back to our previous question too, because I realize another piece that folks don't realize of how state government does not operate like the private sector. It's our hiring practices, our firing practices, it's pay bands. You have to operate in a pay band. I got in and I said, if I have an exceptional employee, why can't I pay them more and then have less people, right? That's how you run a business. You can't do that because our hands are tied with all of these, bureaucratic processes. And so I think all of those should be reevaluated. Again, our hiring, our firing practices, all of that. Okay, you asked about the University of Wyoming. So if those should be elected, I'm not opposed to those being elected at all. That would take a constitutional amendment. And so, recognizing that that's a big shift, I think the voters should have a voice in this. So I'm not opposed at all to that. Again, I'll go back to in the short term, that's having a strong governor, right? And we keep saying, how do we fix this problem? How do we elect this? Do we change this, judicial system here? It comes back to, I hate to say it, David, but you got to elect strong folks in the governor's office. And that's who appoints this board, sits on the board, should not only be just appointing, but as I mentioned before, driving the strategy, that we're getting back to our land grant mission. Here are priority areas. Here's what we're not doing. We're not going to prepare kids for women's studies jobs that do not exist. That the governor should have a stronger voice in all of that.
Well, and it's interesting that you say we need a strong governor, because I think I could make a pretty good argument that our current governor has amassed a tremendous amount of power. And with all of the boards and commissions, the University of Wyoming, the Judicial Nominating Board, all of it, the governor has a lot of stroke in all of that. So let me ask you another one, and this is one that irritates conservatives. I know it irritates the crap out of me. The governor's matching funds, the energy matching funds. It's almost always a fight in the legislature. Are we going to allow the governor to have his big slush fund? One of those was, I think it was $100 million to the company in Gillette, BWXT. So should the governor have that much discretion over such a pile of money to divvy out, where he or she sees fit? Or should that even be a thing, that we're giving money, that one person can decide that we're giving money to, a giant company? What's your view of the governor's energy matching funds?
Yeah, I mean, I think that these decisions should be made by the Wyoming people. I mean, that's who we represent, right? And have that voice and opinion from the people. Now, I'll add on that is that was created by the legislature with a minimum of $50 million. So there's blame to go around, right, of how that was set up and how that was allocated to the governor's office. And again, I'll go back to I think we should be focusing on infrastructure. That is really core to even getting these businesses here. But as I mentioned, everyone likes a photo op, right? And that's really exciting to have in a big press release and all of that. But how do you focus on infrastructure, and how do you create the conditions for a company to be able to come to the state of Wyoming? But I think, like I said, that was from the legislature to the governor's office. But I think absolutely there should be more spread out say and control over these type of funds.
Yeah, with no question about it whatsoever, that the legislature has ceded a lot of its authority to the executive branch. And it's fascinating to me every time you read one of the governor's veto letters. On every bill he's got a 5-page commentary on it, but in every single one of them there's almost always a comment that a separation of powers section. It's almost always like a paragraph, and I don't think that there's any question that the legislature has ceded a lot of its power. My favorite phrase is the agency shall promulgate rules. Well, guess who runs the agency? It's the governor. All right. Well, I know that you're busy today. I just want to give you a couple minutes to tell my audience how they can get a hold of you, and just give us your 2-minute speech, and we'll get you on your way. I know you got a busy schedule today.
You bet. Well, thanks so much for having me again. Really appreciate always being on your show. The race for governor really is the race for the future of Wyoming. And I think our people have a decision to make, and that's whether or not we'll accept status quo or we'll decide that Wyoming's meant to lead. And you look across this country, folks are looking for leadership of the states to take the reins from the federal government that they are trying to hand us during this Trump administration, and really lead and be able to stand unapologetically for our conservative values, for our way of life, to ensure that we have a strong economy where people can afford to actually stay here, and ensuring that our state government is lean enough and that it reflects the people and those who are actually funding it. And that's really what I bring to the table. And I'm excited to share my expertise in energy and education with the future of Wyoming. And so if you want more information, Degenfelder.com. We're on all the socials, and getting out and meeting people everywhere we go. I'm going to leave Casper soon and head to Gillette to be visiting with folks there. This is about the grassroots people. Hearing what they have to say, that's who's going to be making the decision for the future of Wyoming.
All right, Megan, I appreciate it. Drive safe, and I'm sure we'll talk again.
Thanks so much.
All right, that was current Superintendent of Public Instruction, Megan Degenfelder, and she's running for governor. Here pretty quick, we're going to have interviews with the other folks running for governor. I'm pretty sure we can have Brent be in pretty quick, and still have an invitation out to, I'll send one of those out to Mr. Barlow if he wants to come on the program. But, all of those questions that I asked Megan Degenfelder, those are the ones that are We can talk politics all day long, and we can do the political back and forth. But when you get down to it, there are some things that the governor does, or that has the authority to do, that are pretty incredible. One of those is the energy matching funds. It's a giant slush fund. The governor can use it in any way, shape, or form. Another one is all of those agencies. All of those are in the executive branch. There's the judiciary problems. Now, some of these solutions require constitutional amendments. The University of Wyoming was one of those. But why shouldn't the Board of Trustees of the University of Wyoming be elected? Why shouldn't we have senatorial confirmation of judges? Why shouldn't we do all of those things? Well, some of those things are going to take a constitutional change to make that happen. Some of those can be done with a bill in the legislature, and the governor can do some of those. There's no reason why a governor can't say, you know what, I'm done with this slush fund. We're not doing this. Oh, and by the way, agency X, Y, and Z, we're going to make sure we get rid of you too. So there are a lot of things that the governor has the ability to do that, I think that they have a direct impact on the lives of Wyoming citizens. A lot of stuff that the governor does, they really don't affect you a whole heck of a lot. Way more so than what the president of the United States does. But too often, there are a whole bunch of things that the governor has the ability to change or to fix or to not fix, as the case may be, that directly affect you. And so we need to make sure that we're asking those tough questions and getting the candidates' take on them. And one of the big questions, I think, in this gubernatorial election is, who are you going to put in charge of all these agencies? Who are you going to put on the Judicial Nominating Commission? Because right now, it pretty much looks like it's the governor's lackeys. And okay, so the way that it's set up right now, you got the Bar Association gets a couple of posts, you have the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, and then you have the governor's people. And you can't tell me, and I don't care if your name is Lynn Boomgarden and you're talking about the state of the judiciary and you claim that this podcast isn't telling the truth, that's bullcrap, because it's the governor's people, he nominates them, and you won't be able to convince me that he's not the one that says, I don't really think this person over here. But the point is that there are a lot of boards and commissions. The governor appoints most of them, which gives the governor a tremendous amount of power. And we need a governor that's going to reduce that, to reduce the government largesse, and to return that power back to you. And the form that takes is the legislature. Now, again, the legislature is going to have to make those changes, which means that it all boils down to you and me. That elections, you heard Megan say, elections have consequences, and so how this election turns out is going to determine to a great degree what Wyoming looks like come next February. You could have a very liberal legislature. You could have one that's more conservative. But either choice that we make is going to have a pretty good impact on that. So, well, let's see here. You know what? We're a little bit early today, but I do have a couple of things that I need to do. So I think that we'll just go ahead and call the program right here. Make sure that you don't miss a minute of this week's Cowboy State Politics Live. I've got a lot of interviews lined up. Tomorrow, we're going to talk to, let me just check my schedule, actually. We're going to talk to David Hill, I think. Let's see here. Calendar. Here we go. Tomorrow. Yeah. All right. So actually, I forgot about this one. So at 8:30 tomorrow, we're going to talk to Jenna Robinson. She was on the program a while ago. She's the president of the James G. Martin Center, and they've got a new report out about the University of Wyoming. And it says straight up that enrollment is going down, administration is going up. And that's one of the reasons why we have so many problems at the university. So we're going to talk to her at 8:30, and then at 9 o'clock, we're going to talk to David Hill from Park County. That should be an interesting interview, and we're going to continue on. So, but that'll pretty much do it for today's installment of the program. Make sure you have a good afternoon, and we'll see you tomorrow. So from the base of the Bighorns, I'm David Iverson, and this is Cowboy State Politics. See you tomorrow, my friends.